Somewhere out there in this vast world, there were two little field mice, tiny but as close as brothers. They weren't the strongest, nor the smartest, but they had something truly special, an unshakable friendship, and a fierce desire to live, even in a world full of uncertainty. One day, in the middle of their usual mischievous adventures, the two mice stumbled into a situation that seemed impossible to escape. A jar full of cooking oil, slippery, deep, hopeless. One mouse chose to give up, but the other did something no one expected. The story you're about to hear isn't just about two mice. It's a powerful reminder. In this life, as long as you haven't given up, you haven't lost. Listen closely and hold this message in your heart. In a peaceful countryside, where endless green rice fields stretch all the way to the horizon, two little field mice lived side by side in a tiny burrow beneath an old straw mound. No one really remembered when they first met. All they knew was that ever since they were just tiny little things, the two had been inseparable, like true brothers. Everyone called them Tiny and Chubby. Chubby, true to his name, was round, a bit plump, and not very fond of moving around. He loved good food and hated trouble. For him, a full belly of rice grains and a warm corner in the burrow was all he ever wanted. But Tiny was different, small and skinny. He carried a heart full of curiosity and a constant hunger for adventure. He couldn't bear staying still in that damp little hole day after day. He longed to see what lay beyond the fields, what existed past the distant trees, and whether a small mouse like him could ever do something truly great. Despite their differences, the two mice were inseparable. Every morning, Tiny would tug Chubby out of their burrow to race along the rice paddy banks, crawl through the bushes, listen to the birds chirping on bamboo branches, or play with leftover rice grains after the harvest. Chubby might have been lazy, but he adored Tiny. And Tiny, he saw Chubby as his safe haven, the one he could always return to after every wild adventure. They had no family, no parents, no siblings, so they made each other their whole world. Every single day was a brand new adventure, and in the hearts of those two tiny mice, even the simplest life was filled with joy and laughter. But no one could have guessed that very friendship would soon face a brutal test, a moment with no rice fields, no games, only survival, choices, and the strength to never give up. That morning, the sun peeked out after a long night of rain. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil. As usual, the two little mice set off on their early morning adventure, full of excitement. Tiny bounced ahead, his eyes sparkling with energy, while Chubby trailed behind, still mumbling about the rice grains he hadn't finished eating back home. But then a strange scent drifted past on the breeze and made them both stop in their tracks. It was rich, savory, and irresistibly fragrant. They looked at each other, then tiptoed toward the source of the smell. Down a narrow path, through a patch of bushes, they finally arrived at an old storage hut near the edge of the forest. The wooden door was slightly ajar, and right there on the doorstep sat a large clay jar, taller than both of them combined. Chubby licked his lips. "Whatever's inside, it smells amazing," he whispered, his eyes wide with excitement. Tiny was more cautious. He tilted his head and looked around. No humans, no cats, just the jar and the golden, tempting aroma rising from its slick, glistening mouth. "Can't see what's inside," Tiny said softly. "Want to climb up and take a peek?" They used a bamboo pole leaning against the jar as a ladder. Each step made their hearts pound, but curiosity was stronger than fear. As they reached the rim and stretched forward to look in, suddenly a gust of wind blew. The pole shifted, and then, plop, they both tumbled straight into the jar. "Bluff! Ugh, what is this?" Chubby shrieked, flailing wildly. His plump little body splashed into a cold, greasy liquid. Tiny coughed, choking as he tried to grip the wall, but it was far too slick to hold on to. The jar was filled with cooking oil. There were no footholds to climb, no ropes, nothing to float on, just a wide, slippery pool and tall, smooth walls all around. They were trapped, caught in a trap they never saw coming. we can't climb out, Chubby gasped, struggling to keep his head above the oil. This jar's too tall. Tiny said nothing. His heart pounded in his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt the chilling truth of real danger. This was no longer a game, no longer a harmless adventure. This was a fight to survive. The jar seemed to grow taller with every passing moment. The surface of the oil shimmered under the sunlight, beautiful, almost magical, but deadly. At the bottom of the jar, the two little mice swam in desperate circles, paddling non-stop to keep from sinking. At first, they both tried their best. Tiny swam slowly but steadily, his eyes scanning for any possible way out. Chubby flailed up and down, gripped by fear and exhaustion. Every time he slipped beneath the surface and came up gasping, he cried out, "Tiny, Tiny, are you still there? I'm here. Keep going. Don't stop." Tiny called back, doing everything he could to keep his voice strong. But as the hours dragged on, the oil, unlike water, proved heavier, slicker, harder to fight against. Every kick, every stroke felt like starting from scratch. There was no progress, no hope, only exhaustion creeping in one heartbeat at a time. Chubby began to pant. His round body, once full of energy, now moved sluggishly. His plump little arms shook. He hiccuped, then said softly, "Tiny, I'm so tired. I can't. I really can't anymore. I think this is it for me." "Don't say that," Tiny urged, still paddling. "We'll find a way. You can't stop. If you stop swimming, you'll sink." Chubby was quiet for a moment. Then, between ragged breaths and the sloshing of oil against the jar, he murmured, "No one's coming to save us. I know it. No one. I'm not a bird. I can't fly away. I'm not a fish. I can't swim forever. We're just mice. And maybe this is where it ends." Tiny turned to him. His eyes stung. "No, you have to believe me. As long as we don't give up, we'll survive. I promise." But Chubby didn't answer. He simply looked at Tiny one last time, a tired gaze but filled with love. Then he let go. His body drifted downward, slowly, like a falling leaf, vanishing beneath the still surface of the oil. No sound, no goodbye. Tiny froze. His tiny heart shattered inside his chest. Since the day he first opened his eyes in that old burrow, he had never imagined he'd see his best friend disappear like this. He screamed, sobbed, shouted his name again and again, hoping, praying for a paw to reach back up from the oil. But nothing came, only the echo of his breath and the crushing emptiness all around. In that moment, Tiny almost gave up. But then, a spark, a thought. If I give up too, then it really is over. But if I keep going, maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance. The moment Chubby sank to the bottom of the jar, time seemed to freeze. Tiny drifted aimlessly in the thick, suffocating oil, where just moments ago, there had been laughter, voices, and a pair of familiar eyes. Now, only silence remained. He wanted to scream, to cry, but he understood. No one would hear the voice of a tiny mouse in this vast, indifferent world. Quietly, he wiped the oil from his eyes. He looked up at the sky through the narrow mouth of the jar, where the sunlight was beginning to fade. And in that cold, crushing moment of despair, a small flame flickered to life. Not a flame of strength, but of belief. A fragile, flickering hope that refused to die. As long as I keep swimming, I'm still alive. And if I'm alive, anything is possible. He began kicking harder, more steadily. No more shouting Chubby's name. No more asking, "When will someone come?" He simply fought against the oil, the darkness, and the fear inside his chest. Time melted by, slow and unforgiving. Night fell. The pale moon climbed high. But still, Tiny didn't stop swimming. Each flick of his tail was a silent promise whispered to his fallen friend. "I won't die, so your story won't disappear with you." Every tiny muscle ached. His back throbbed, paws burned, heart pounded out of rhythm. Many times he thought of giving up, just for a moment of rest, a peaceful end. But then, in his weakest moments, he saw it again. Chubby's eyes, just before he let go. Sad, yes, but full of trust. "You believed I could survive, didn't you? Then I have to survive. No one knows how long a little mouse can swim in oil. There's no record for hopeless persistence. But in the stillness of the night, when the world had gone quiet, a miracle happened. Tiny felt something beneath his feet. The oil no longer moved like liquid. Something was forming, thicker, firmer, solid. He slowed his paddling and realized he was standing. After countless hours of constant kicking, his tiny body had churned the oil into thick butter. The surface had risen, solid enough to hold his weight. He looked up, eyes blurry with tears and oil. Then, he bent his knees and leapt. A final, determined jump. One last stretch toward a sky full of stars. He was free. Tiny Mouse collapsed onto the grass outside the jar, his body sticky with oil, completely exhausted, but he had survived. The morning sun had just begun to rise, and its first gentle rays fell on his small frame, soaked in grease, yet shining brighter than ever. He lay there, gasping for air, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. Relief, gratitude, and heartbreak for the friend who hadn't made it out of the darkness with him. Chubby, the one who had been by his side since they were just tiny pups in a nest of dried grass. The friend who always got excited finding candy crumbs in the kitchen, who laughed the loudest whenever they escaped the old cat. Now, he lived only in memories. Tiny stood up. He didn't look back at the jar. His little feet turned toward the forest, where sunlight filtered through the green leaves. He walked forward, not because he had forgotten, but because he had to live to tell the story. Years later, in a warm nest tucked beneath the roots of a great oak tree, Tiny, now a father, would sit among his little ones, his voice low and tender. My children, in life, there will come a time when you find yourselves inside your own jar. Maybe it'll be failure, maybe loneliness, or loss. Maybe it'll be a place so dark you'll feel like no one is coming to save you. But remember this, as long as you keep swimming, you still have a chance. The young mice would stare up at him with wide eyes, quietly in awe. The littlest one would whisper, "Daddy, what about your friend? Was he saved too?" Tiny bowed his head. There was a brief silence. Then he smiled softly and stroked his child's head. "No, sweetheart, my friend gave up. And when someone gives up, no miracle in the world can save them." From that day on, the young mice began learning patience, learning persistence. Even if it was just climbing a low branch or paddling across a puddle, they carried that story in their hearts, not just as a memory, but as a little light, always glowing, especially on the darkest days. And Tiny, each night, as he looked up at the stars, would always whisper, "Chubby, I lived, not just for me, but for you too." Maybe life is like a tall, slick jar filled with oil. No warning, no signs, just one misstep, and suddenly you're falling into a dark, slippery place with no clear way out. No one comes to rescue you. There's no rope, no ladder, no magic. There's only you and a choice. Keep swimming or give up. Chubby gave up, and he left this world in exhaustion, believing there was no hope left. He wasn't weak. He was just a small soul, worn down in the enormous jar of life. Haven't we all felt like him at some point? Felt like it was all meaningless? Wanted to take a long nap and just disappear from the weight of this life? But Tiny stayed. He kept swimming, even when his legs were numb, even when everything hurt. He didn't know why he was still trying. He didn't know if escape was even possible. But he didn't stop, because as long as he was moving, he was still alive. And miraculously, that persistence created the impossible. It turned oil into butter. It turned despair into hope. Tiny's story isn't just about a lucky mouse. It's a reminder to all of us that true strength doesn't lie in muscles, money, or intelligence. It lies in believing in yourself. Even when the whole world turns its back, when you fall into your own jar, maybe it's failing an exam, losing your job, heartbreak, or just feeling empty in the middle of a chaotic life. Remember the image of a tiny mouse swimming in the darkness, not knowing what tomorrow holds, but still kicking, still breathing. Just keep swimming, even if your eyes are blurred with tears, even if your heart aches, even if everything around you screams, you can't, because Miracles don't happen to those who quit. They happen to those who dare to stay and keep going. And if one day you do make it out, you won't just save yourself. You'll become a light for someone else. Just like Tiny, telling his story to the next generation, planting in their hearts a single seed called, never give up. Life will throw you into more than one jar that seems impossible to escape. There will be moments when you feel alone, exhausted, and ready to give up. But please remember this: you only truly lose when you stop trying. As long as you're still swimming, even just a little, you still have a chance. As long as you don't give up, the miracle is still waiting up ahead. Be like Tiny, persistent, quiet, and never, ever give up.